Welcome to the Rock's Back Pages podcast. My name's Barney Hoskyns. I'm here with my colleague Mark Pringle.
Hello, Barney.
And we're here with our good friend and co-founder of Rock's Back Pages, Martin Colyer. Welcome.
Good morning, all.
Hello, Martin.
Hello, Martin.
It's been too long.
So good to have you here, Martin. And one of the things we're going to talk about while you're here is how Rock's Back Pages came to be. Just the whole convoluted history of RBP. So please stay tuned for that.
Before we go too further, just to give Martin some context, is that his father named and co-invented skiffle. So I think that's a bit of the important rock history is in the room with us right
Absolutely,
now.
Mark. Well, thank you for that.
I don't know how far that
footnote
runs in the family, but we'll see.
But yeah, we will be talking later about how the three of us came together almost over 20 years ago. But we're also going to be talking, as usual, about what's new on Rock's Back Pages this week. And Martin, I'm sure, will have something to say about all of this. We're going to start with the great Curtis Mayfield, who Rhino have just released a box set comprising his first 4 solo albums after he left the Impressions. So we thought it was a suitable opportunity to talk about a man I think we'd probably all agree is a genius of soul music.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Martin, what's your take on Curtis?
Well, what I always really liked about Mayfield was, and I have to say, to introduce it, that reading Grail Marcus's Mystery Train at a certain point in my life, soon after it had come out, it kind of influenced the way that I looked at music and listened to music.
Yeah.
And there are various references to Curtis in the book, in the section especially about Stagger Lee, the myth of Stagger Lee,
Yes.
the song, and Sly Stone's Riot. And there's just a bit. Can I just read a little bit from
Yeah.
Ooh, he's done his homework.
Oh, we do like guests who do their homework.
Yeah. Can you edit out me trying to find the page?
No, that's staying
That's
in.
staying in.
Oh, damn it.
Be careful what you ask for.
So Stagger Lee was a fairy tale, but like most of the Stagger Lee movies, Superfly, which Curtis Mayfield famously soundtracked, had a soundtrack by an established soul singer, and in this case, Curtis Mayfield's songs were not background, but criticism. Mayfield had appeared in the picture singing in a dealer's bar, grinding out an attempted parody of his audience, but they thought it was a celebration. His music worked against the fantasy, because to him one incident in the movie counted for more than all its triumphs. Freddie's dead. Pushing dope for the man, he sang, incredulous and disgusted. The movie hadn't even slowed to give Freddie an epitaph, but Mayfield clearly aimed his song at the hero as well. And interestingly, the lyrics were not in the movie, even though the backing track was. Mayfield held off until the film was in the theatres, then wrote the words, released the records, and so took on the picture on his own turf, the radio. You could say chickened out. You could also say he was very smart.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting.
Yeah.
For me, I mean, first of all, as a kind of R&B guitar player, as I once was, I didn't even realise I was being influenced by Curtis when I was, because Hendrix's Axis Boulder's Love was a massive record for me when I was in my early teens. And it's Hendrix's Curtis Mayfield record in some respects. I mean, there are so many songs which absolutely come from the Curtis canon. A wonderful guitar player. Well, I was lucky to see Curtis live about 3 or 4 times. And the first time I saw him at a free concert at Crystal Palace Bowl, open air concert. And I couldn't hear him at first. I realised I had to retune to his voice, which was higher than one could almost imagine. And once I'd tuned in, he was absolutely right there.
Interestingly, talking to Richard Williams about Mayfield's appearance on the Old Grey Worcester test when Richard was hosting, he said that they turned their amps all the way down to 1, but managed to make their short sets sound and feel like the best gig happening anywhere in the world that night.
Yeah.
And you had to lean in to hear Curtis, didn't you? It was filigree and it was delicate and it was, but still had drive and groove.
I mean, my first memory of Mayfield, I think, was not the Old Grey Whistle Test performance, but I think On Top of the Pops. He was so startlingly different, not just from the usual sort of pop acts on Top of the Pops, but just from any kind of soul artist, really, that I had seen before. And I still think of him as very different from so many of the giants in the soul R&B canon. And it may explain partly why he's never mentioned in the same breath as kind of Marvin Gaye or Otis Redding or Aretha Franklin, or James Brown. And I think he absolutely should be. But there's something about the voice, which is never like a big sort of barking soul voice. And there's something about his appearance, there's something about his guitar playing, the subtlety and nuances of his music that I think perhaps count against his long-term reputation.
I think you're saying subtlety and nuance. I think his music is all about subtlety and nuance.
Yes, Mark.
And there's a delicacy there which is rare in any popular music, let alone R&B. Interestingly, that he's one of a group of black singers, male black singers, who singing extraordinarily high, Eddie Kendricks being another one, is something that outside of a few people in the Four Seasons and so on and so forth, is that white singers generally don't do. The white American voice was often a baritone. You think about Jim Morrison, those sorts of people. Yeah. And yet you get, in black music, this is a thing where black men don't lose their masculinity singing in the female range, which is effectively what he was doing.
Well, if he started out with Jerry Butler, one of the great baritone singers, and something like "He Will Break Your Heart," the guitar and the voice on that are so fantastic. That's just a kind of
oh my god,
incredible song. I think we can safely say for all three of us, he's a hero.
Yeah.
And the tragedy of how his life ended up. I mean, of all things, this is a man who I've heard no tittle-tattle of as in terms of drugs and womanizing. He may well have done a bit of womanizing, but he was, by the standards of popular music, full stop, he was a good man. And he's playing a charity concert in New York, and a lighting tower falls on him, and he's paralysed from the neck down. For something like that to happen to someone who led a blameless life is,
But he's sort of he's this kind of anti-Sly Stone. Yeah.
He turned up for gigs on time.
Yeah, in that kind of blaxploitation era, he stands out as almost this kind of preacher / philosopher. He's this wise old kind of owl whose music is really about. It never celebrates the violence and darkness of those times. It's always a critique, but it's never a holier than thou critique. There's so much compassion and wisdom in his songs, and
he's sung about women in a delightful way.
Absolutely respectfully. I mean, the song like "The Makings of You." Yeah. What a gorgeous, song that is. A celebration of kind of womanhood.
You can hear him in all sorts of people too. Yeah. I think you can hear him in Van Morrison.
Yeah.
The Woodstock Van Morrison.
And there is a downside to him. There's pricks like Paul Weller glommed onto him and almost ruined him for us at one point in the 80s. But, moving... But anyway... No.
Moving on up.
Yeah, moving on up and moving on to...
very good.
This is another very difficult segue from the magnificent Mayfield to... Sigue, Sputnik. How do we do that? How did I do, boys? There's no easy way to go into the world of Tony James and Martin Degville. But what we have as our featured audio interview this week is a 1985 interview with Tony and Martin about Sigue, Sputnik, who already at that point are clearly sort of massively overhyped.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about particularly Tony's conversation with Julian Henry.
Well, I mean, Tony James and Martin Degville are both fairly kind of ghastly individuals,
Don't pull your punches.
Tony James
he never does.
No. Tony James is sort of claiming that they're reinventing rock and roll as filtered through video, television, and science fiction movies. That actually, what the music is the soundtrack to the Sigue Sputnik movie, and he's immensely pleased with himself. And actually, the pleasure I got from listening to that is this band tanked. I mean, they had like kind of half a hit, and that was.
It is all about the hubris, really, isn't it? Because Tony clearly thought that he was going to change the paradigm of pop.
Well, I love the fact that I was looking into them last night because I did remember them, and actually quite fondly. And it's funny because the musical is just kind of rockabilly over a Giorgio Moroder beat with a bit of sound effects.
A bit of suicide, a lot of suicide.
Frankie's,
but without any of the good bits of suicide.
Suicide, but crack.
Yes. But that's great. That "We invented the future" was their tagline. Unfortunately, their website has not been updated since 2015. So maybe we invented the past, we invented the 80s.
Then Martin Degville is just a rather simple little clothes horse. I mean, you listen to him talking, and he's a just a bit
But
thick,
check
really.
out those leather
What's his
chaps
accent?
and the-
Yeah, it's Walsall. He grew up in Walsall,
is
so it's sort of like if you could have kind of imagined Boy George coming from Walsall. There's a sort of camp lisping thing going on, but with this, wonderfully down to a sort of Brummy sort of sub undertow to it.
And he's talking about his clothes, which is just so uninteresting. Both of them have a go at their sort of current popular stars. That Degville has a go at Boy George for being safe. Well, I'm sorry, I mean, whatever you think of Boy George, he's 100 times the performer, the writer, the everything that Degville was. Tony James has a go at Billy Idol, his erstwhile colleague in Generation X.
Who's at this point quite a big star, becoming a really big star in America.
And you can just sort of... just a little touch of resentment. He also has to go at, like, Billy Idol's rock and roll lifestyle, because Billy Idol was hoovering up the drugs like a maniac at that point. And, that's fair enough. I'm not going to complain about that. But, he's also trying to claim that Billy Idol's just a kind of a refried rocker, which is essentially true.
Yeah, there's a lot of Eddie Cochran in all these bands, strangely.
Well,
cross with Sweet.
But Billy Idol went on and I think 2 or 3 Billy Idol records I absolutely love. I mean the good proper classic rock and roll tunes. And Sigue Sputnik.
Well, I think their
so.
story is told by the fact that their first producer was Giorgio Moroder and their second producer was Stock Aitken and Waterman.
I mean, it's such an 80s story, isn't it? In many ways, it's 1985, and it's sort of the 80s going into such sort of excessive, sort of grandiose over-conceptualization.
Yes.
I mean, listening to the interview last night, I had some sympathy with Tony because in some ways they were ahead of their time. They were thinking about the kind of multi-mediated experience of pop with televisions and computers, and it's all about image, and I'm not even really interested in music anymore. But the problem is with Tony is that it's so sort of manufactured. It's like he's trying to be some kind of Malcolm McLaren, and the problem is there's no heart in the music at all, and it's so...
There's not a point of view. There's not a kind of...
It's just a sort of shameless celebration of kind of plasticity and surface and spectacle.
And a lot of that kind of buffalo styling. That was kind of so face.
I'm marvelling at the photograph we have in front of us of the band. I mean, bloody hell.
The Hiawatha headdresses. Kind of...
I mean, if it had worked, of course, we might be saying something different now. But the problem is they invited such Schadenfreude, didn't they? And so they're very... I mean, they talk about, we're not interested in trash rock and all that kind of sort of junky stuff. I mean, the fact is, 3 years previously, Tony was actually playing bass with Johnny Thunders in London.
Well, maybe that's a lesson, yes.
So, exactly. So, okay, I need to do something different. But so there we go. I mean, it's worth listening to just for the hubris, isn't it?
And also, I think it's a very good...
of the 80s.
It's a good snapshot of 80s hype and the journalist's part in that process as the interviewer. It's well worth listening to, but just sort of like, keep a sick bag close at hand. So
here's a brief clip of Tony James talking about the 5 stages of rock and roll. Of course, Sigue, Sputnik being the 5th and sort of defining stage of rock and roll.
Generation thing. What it is, first generation of rock and roll was like the Elvis, Eddie Cochran mob. I have to get this worked out. Then there was as far as I'm concerned, Eddie Cochran, Elvis, Rolling Stones, Ziggy Stardust, Bowie, and Suicide. That's 4. And this is the 5th generation of rock and roll. Those are the 4 kind of milestones where they took rock and roll music and kind of moved on another step. You know what I mean? Like, there was like Eddie Cochran, and then Stones took it and made it for someone else, and then Ziggy took the Stones, the Suicide took all of them, made it electronic, and then we taken all of that and moved on a step forward. Right. Added a bit of dub reggae, a bit of rap, and a bit of Donna Summer's rhythm section, a bit of Mark Ballard. It was simple, the theory of the group. I feel love's rhythm section. Add 2 drummers. Get Mark Ballard on guitar. Get Elvis on vocals.
So Martin's Elvis.
Of course. And you got Blade Runner.
Right.
Right. And the fifth generation thing ties very, very deeply into the fact that the new generation of computers that were designed in Japan are called the fifth generation computers, which are intelligent machines. Right.
So briefly, just to note the featured writer of the week, this is three free pieces by Mac Randall, who, interestingly, of course, wrote a book about Radiohead long before our Radiohead anthology came out. But these are, Mac wrote for Musician, he wrote for Harp, I think he wrote for the Boston Phoenix. I think he's currently the editor of Jazz Times in America. Very nice dude. Three pieces. One, a conversation, fascinating conversation between Bill Nelson and Robert Wyatt, just about maverick musics and politics. A profile of Linda Thompson after she breaks her 17-year silence on the fashionably late album in 2002. And a conversation with Beck when Guero came out in 2005. So that's Mac Randall. Mark, I'm going to hand over to you now. You're going to tell us about highlights of what's going into the Rocksmith Pages library for subscribers this week.
Well, so amongst the jewels, just starting off with Del Shannon being interviewed by Ian Dove in Record Mirror in 62, just for a single quote, really. He said, I was really disappointed last week. I wanted to go and see your Arsenal play that Spanish team, Real Madrid. I mean, this made all of us roll with laughter in the office. The
Did seem very improbable, didn't it?
Didn't it? Moving swiftly on, Nick Jones interviewing Diana Ross in 65. This is actually a really great little piece. This is coming off the back of the kind of failure of the Motown tour at the beginning of 65, when a bunch of Motown artists came out and played to half-empty halls around England. It really, really wasn't a success. And so she's a bit baffled. She says, it's very surprising that Wilson Pickett and James Brown are doing well here being the UK. They've always sold in the States, but it's not that big. It's like,
Wow.
Because around exactly the same time, the first Stax tour had come over here and absolutely torn the place out. She said, I dig Wilson Pickett's voice, but I think he's shouting a lot more than he used to and ruining it a bit. So there's a bit of like Motown versus Stax tension going on there. It's a good piece generally. She talks about sort of, her place in the Supremes and so on and so forth. Moving on, our live show is more subversive than Street Fighting Man admits Keith Richards at Keith Altham, NME 1968. And it's Keith and Mick being interviewed about Beggar's Banquet, which is about to come out, and about a performance movie, which, of course, Mick is a star in, and it features Keith's then girlfriend, Anita Pallenberg. And Keith Altham says, perhaps Mick would like to tell us something about his new movie, Performance, on which he's just begun work. I make love to Anita Pallenberg in it a few times, of course. She's my leading light in the film. I'm not telling him any more about it because it doesn't come out until next year. Well, the fact is there's Keith in the room and Mick is and apparently the story is that Keith parked his car in Power Square while this is being filmed, fuming at the notion that Mick was in the same bath, naked as his
Of course,
partner.
Keith got his revenge many years later.
He did it.
Infamous aside about the dimensions of Mick's Todger.
Moving on to 76, a Robert Duncan report on a new recreational drug which is appearing in America. When I first started reading this, I thought it was a spoof piece. It was about, a bit like the cake thing, And it isn't. It's actually about ketamine, which is now a huge drug in the and has been since the 90s, particularly in this country and the rave scene and so on and so forth.
Yes.
This is in 1976, he's talking about ketamine. It pretty much disappeared. It didn't develop any real traction, so far as I'm aware.
What scene was it part of there?
Well, it came out of the West Coast. The Tubes apparently liked doing it. Fee Waybill was kind of prone to a bit of ketamine.
They looked a bit CC.
They were
Tubes in a K-hole.
The Tubes in a K-hole. But it's really about, this is a new drug, and it could be the next big thing. And it wasn't. I mean, basically, what was already in America was PCP, angel dust, which is not dissimilar from what I've heard to ketamine in terms of its effects. PCP was massively widespread right through to the 80s. I mean, the go-go scene was fueled on angel dust. Ketamine didn't develop any traction. Then in this country, around 91, 92, 93, it started coming in. And it's now everywhere. There's, you go, you see like someone wandering down the street, as they say in this article, looking like they're walking in slow motion. They're on ketamine. Swiftly on to 78. Viv Stanshall being interviewed by David Hancock, and it's Viv Stanshall. He's kind of on his way down into a sort of serious lunacy, which more or less did him in the end, didn't it?
Was this interview done with Viv in a swimming pool? Because we had this picture, didn't we?
I think it was the Holiday in Swiss Cottage, and he's in the swimming pool.
Not the Holiday in Los Angeles.
And Dave Hancock is crouching by the side of the pool. He says in the end Viv more or less forced him into the water. He says, that 4-bedroom house I had was absolutely full of clutter. It was rather like the inside of my head in reverse. And I think that's kind of quite significant. Then he says, then the tarantula snuffed it. So here, the pet tarantula. We didn't notice for 3 days, and it had been such a lively little rascal. A year later, Mick Middles for Sounds seeing Joy Division live at the Old Factory Club in the Russell Club in Manchester. And Mick Middles was kind of Sounds as Mr. Manchester and was a big cheerleader for...
Well, one of the only journalists to actually interview Ian Curtis, or Joy Division when Curtis was still alive.
That's absolutely right. And his final line in this rave review of them live is, they never fail to amaze me with their morbid genius. Sensuous, seductive and deadly. This band cry real tears. I mean, it's
great.
It's great stuff.
Great.
Jumping, I managed to miss out the 80s this time around. Funny that. I think we dealt with the 80s with 60s.
I think CC covered
It's
it.
brought back so many horrible memories.
Pretty admirable Andrew Weatherall being interviewed by David Benham, Melody Maker, in '94. And he had famously produced Screamadelica, or kind of co-produced Screamadelica for Primal Scream, done a lot of remix work, producing his own stuff. And you get the feeling he resents being boxed into a certain sort of dance ghetto. He says, there's all this brilliant music around. Why is everyone up their own arse? Why is everything so compartmentalised? And, he's absolutely right. And he says later on, if I had 20 minutes of my life to spend, I'd rather listen to a selection of Ramones and Phil Spector records than one 20-minute ambient track.
Yeah.
Right. Quite right, mate.
Great.
Lastly, in '98, Mark Weingarten, big profile interview with the wonderful Missy Elliott. She says, I'm very picky about my clothes. My people know that if my wardrobe isn't right or my hair isn't right, I ain't going on stage.
Carrying on a wonderful tradition of diva-ishness.
It's a very nice piece. I mean, I think we all very fond of Missy Elliott.
Absolutely.
And she comes over as a wonderful character, strong. She carved out areas as a woman in black music, which really no one had done before. And as a producer, way before she started having hits, her and her partner Timbaland were producing and writing for all kinds of people, not just in hip hop, but in R&B.
So a kind of Betty Wright figure.
Actually, a sort of modern Betty Wright figure. I mean, she had a big hit for Alia and people like that.
Absolutely. And she's still around. I would always hope that she makes some kind of proper comeback.
Well, last year she had a really cracking record out with a great video. I don't know how well it did because it's all.
I love that first album. I thought was absolutely magnificent.
When we had our office up in Crouch End, that was on the hi-fi all the time.
And I really I have to say, it wasn't a huge hit, but I really liked the second album that she did with Timbaland, The Real World, which was a kind of cyber funk version of hip hop that I thought was sort of brilliant and futuristic.
But she also took from interesting areas. I mean, she was listening to a lot of Anglo-Asian music at the time.
Yeah, of course.
There is that kind of thread running through.
Sort of Bhangra influence.
And she sampled that, didn't she, on that great track. Fabulous. So just a couple of pieces to mention from more recent years. Well, I saw that you actually added a piece on Harlan Howard, which I would just like to flag up because he's one of the great songwriters of country music. And it's just him and his own words, talking about how he came to Nashville and started writing songs for the great artists there. Also, Max Bell, the great Max Bell, one of my NME heroes from the 70s and 80s, sent me the other day an unpublished and sort of hair-raising piece about Bobby Whitlock of Delaney Bonnie and Derek and the Dominoes fame, which was, I think, commissioned but never published by Classic Rock, because I think it was too outrageous in terms of the sort of antics that Whitlock and Clapton and Carl Radle and so forth got up to.
Did you ever read
both here
Whitlock's
and in
book?
America?
He wrote
No,
a book,
I
didn't he?
haven't.
I haven't read it either.
No. But this is just the sort of
there.
stories of sort of tearing around, sort of towns like Sonning in Berkshire, sort of off their heads, sort of racing around in Eric's sort of Rolls Royce, trying to find heroin. I mean, it's
Not a great place to find heroin.
No, but I think they still managed to find it. And then a new writer's just come on board, Lois Wilson of Mojo fame, and we're really delighted to have her on RBP now, and we've sort of opened her account, as it were, with a piece about heroes of ours, Dan Pan and Spooner Oldham from 2016. Yeah, Southern Soul songwriters par excellence.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
that's some of the stuff that's new for subscribers. So, have a look and think about subscribing. Please also do review this podcast on iTunes and elsewhere if you feel so inclined, and indeed if you actually do enjoy it. We're actually going to go back in time, aren't we, Martin?
We are.
We're going to sort of try and work out what the three of us are actually doing, sitting, how it came to be. How did we get here? From
What a
sort of
long, strange trip it's been.
What a long, strange trip.
Do you want me to take us right back to the beginning?
I'm always interested in this because
your memory is probably
this is like Rashomon.
Yeah,
you get three people together, you get.
We're all going to
different
contradict
accounts.
each other, that's for sure.
Way before Rock's Back Pages.
Yes.
I was at a free concert in the park in summer of 1974. Toots and the Maytals, Judy Felix.
G.T. Moore and his reggae guitars.
Roger McGuinn, I think, was headlining it rather badly. And this guy sat next to me, and we got talking, and he said, "Can you keep my place?" And he went away. And then, starting art school that September, this head came around the door and said, "You kept my place for me at the park." And I never came back. And that was Martin, and we ended up in our band together, Hot House, that I talked about a couple of weeks ago with Michelle Kirsch. Take it further, Barney, from up to...
Well, Martin, what's your memory? It'd be great now if you just contradicted everything Mark said.
Mark was absolutely right. But I remembered him because he was writing in a little leather-bound notebook, and I thought, I'm going to art college in a couple of weeks. I must get myself a leather-bound notebook and actually write some things down.
The difference is that if you did that, you'd be able to read your handwriting. Martin has the most immaculate handwriting I've ever seen.
And Mark's is officially illegible.
It is officially illegible.
So my recall,
Pringle.
where I sort of inserted myself into the Pringle Colyer story, is that I wrote a book about the band, and before that came out, I wrote a little something about Bill Graham, the promoter.
An obituary in The Guardian.
An obituary, and I wrote a sort of footnote to that because I'd interviewed Bill Graham, who'd obviously put the band on, the Fillmore and Winterland and so forth. And Bill then died probably about 3 months later in a helicopter crash. And Martin got in touch with me because I'd mentioned I was writing a book about the band. And Martin was, as it turned out, a huge fan of the band, as well as a huge fan of Southern Soul. And so that was really where it all coalesced, that we shared these musical tastes.
Yes, I had a load of magazines with articles about the band that in those pre-internet days were actually quite hard to find. I think I had Cream, there was a Grill Marcus.
And you had videos, you had a video of the Eat Your Document.
Yes, I did, because I collected a bunch of Dylan stuff.
So I came round to yours.
Yes,
we were both actually living in Clapham, as it turned out. So we didn't have to come very far. Yeah. And we became...
Southwestern London.
And you were an incredible help, and you've been an incredible help to me throughout my, authorial career, but we became fast friends, and through that I was introduced to Mark.
Yes.
At a gig, I think?
No, the Rashomon. You're convinced it was a gig. I seem to remember that Martin took the two of us out for lunch at Joe Allen's when I was...
I don't remember the Joe Allen's
while I was
lunch.
freelancing at World Service.
World Service, where I was
that was,
at the time.
in my recollection, the very first time I met you.
That's probably true, actually. But I think the first idea that you had for Rocks Back Pages was when you came back
Oh
from
yes,
living
so
in Woodstock.
that was certainly
true?
after that, because Mark came to visit me in Woodstock.
That's right.
I think you sort of sent him to Woodstock for the sort of tour, really. And we did a bit of a tour.
We did.
We stayed the night.
I saw the big
And
pink.
we were both a lot younger than then, obviously. But so what then happened was that I moved back to London with my family in late 99, and it was the sort of height of the .com madness.
That's right.
And so everyone was scrambling around trying to think of ideas that were going to make the millions.
The route to the yacht.
The route to the yacht, as our friend Matt Snow put it.
Unfortunately, it just became the route to Yacht Rock.
Yeah, exactly. That's
Something went
the only
terribly
yacht
wrong.
really that we've ever seen. But so I kind of woke up one day and had this idea of what became Rocks Back Pages, which was a library of articles going back, at that point, kind of 50 years. But so that if you were a fan of say, Roy Harper was the name, because someone had asked me, or if I wanted to find a writer on Roy Harper, who would I go to?
Weren't you meant to be doing some sleeve notes?
No, I basically got an inquiry, whether an email, I can't remember, from a press officer looking for someone to write some Roy Harper. So I had this kind of vision of, wouldn't it be great if you could see, in a kind of ideal, what every article had ever been written about Roy Harper, starting in the early 60s, right up to
And I
present
remember
day.
we got very excited by the idea that you would get accounts of things when they were released before there was any critical blanket about them.
It was the idea, in a way.
Some records got really badly reviewed when they came
Yeah,
out, which
sure.
are now seen as
Being able to go back to what was written, what was said then, rather than the kind of the sort of retrospective consensus
It's
view
what
of everything.
academics call reception studies, which is where you return to contemporaneous material.
primary sources.
Ironically, is what you were just saying about album reviews. Is one of the myths which has emerged is that all the classic albums, with one or two exceptions, were slagged off at the time. And actually, what I've discovered is that most of them
were spotted as
classic albums at the time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
But yes, the idea is to kind of view pop music history through contemporaneous sources rather than the mojos and the uncuts and the sort of the retrospective histories.
and that it would be this resource, this.
Precisely, it would be the library of writing on popular music and all genres.
Yeah.
So you were literally the only person I knew who had designed and built a website for anybody. And I knew that through Martin, that you were doing websites for the BBC and other clients.
Yeah.
And you loved the music that we loved, and I remember calling you and getting your number from Martin, calling you and saying, what do you think? Would you be interested?
And we went and had lunch at Wagamama's.
Well, I thought it was Joe Allen's.
No, that
was before you went to America.
Joe Wagamama.
No, don't confuse the issue.
Oh, well, all I remember is meeting at Martin's. We actually had an evening meeting at Martin's.
His memory is... I thought my memory's bad. First of all, you
might be misremembering
No,
all this.
first of all, you and I met at Wagamama's. That's the first I heard of the idea.
Okay,
the idea, yes.
And it was like, would you be interested in being involved in it?
Yeah.
Then we had
Then we came to see you. I remember it was after dark. I just remember being sort of huddled over some notes in your house in Clapham.
Right.
And that was the real sort of germ of
Yeah.
the thing. We literally sort of shook hands and we agreed that we were going to try and make this happen.
Yeah. And then a decade of poverty followed.
Then a lot of rolling boulders uphill. I mean, it's been a long journey.
It was fascinating, that early period, though, because it was driven by that kind of desire to do something. I mean, we were all fervid in our enthusiasm for doing it. And then we just ran into... You brought Tony on board, who became someone with, sound financial
sense.
We actually found someone who could raise some money or get some investment. We knew nothing about that.
It has to be said very little, because in fact, as we were doing this, the dot-com bubble burst.
Yes.
What was interesting is that we had lots of meetings with various people who were looking to put seed capital into things, and they're virtually all gone, and we're still there.
Well, that's
in a way,
true.
the best thing that happened is we didn't get major investment.
Yeah.
We had to kind of pretty much do it, put ourselves up by our own
I think
bootstraps.
we've always said, in retrospect, thank God we didn't get sort of $2 million because almost certainly would have spunked it all and had nothing to show for it.
I would have.
Yeah.
Well, speak for yourselves, guys. I would just had a really, really nice, comfortable life.
Isn't that the same thing
But
as
actually,
spunking?
what I remember was we would meet people in towers in the city.
That's right.
In boardrooms,
Deutsche Bank.
and they would
Of course.
take us really seriously, and we'd do prospectuses for them, and we learnt as we were going along, and nothing ever came of anything.
That's
anyway,
right.
except for we did spend a hilarious day with Dave Stewart.
Well,
at his
Dave-
house, not a million miles from Sunny.
Well, and Dave did.
And Dave did.
Chuck some money in.
Dave
you know.
was doing a lot of big blue sky thinking.
He was. It's
involved.
actually
it's
hard to keep up.
It's more Paisley Sky
Yeah.
thinking, I think.
Well, and he was
Dave.
involved with Paul Allen of
riveting.
Microsoft
Yes.
That's right.
fame, and trying to get something off the ground called the Artist Network, and
Yes.
and it was
was
either ahead of its time or it was misconceived. But he did put some money into Rock's Back Pages.
Yeah.
He also gave us an office in Crouch End
That's
here
right.
in London. So
Yeah,
Dave
no,
really
no, he
played
absolutely
his
did.
part in those early days. And I mean, Martin, of course, you had a proper grown-up job anyway.
Well,
rather than
I am a professional dilettante, really. I mean,
Far from it.
I maybe. In fact, when Mark and I were in a band together, I was still working at the Observer magazine. For 2 of those years, it was like 2 weeks Hot House, 2 weeks Observer.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And everyone put up with that, which is probably, in retrospect, a mistake. Maybe I should have committed more.
No,
But it was,
I think it's very wise.
It meant I didn't take much from the advances, so that was quite.
No, that's
you know,
true.
it was quite. That was quite a good thing.
We met every
so I-
Monday evening
We
at
did.
my place
That's
in
right.
Clapham with, there were sort of 6 or 7 of us,
Yeah,
weren't there? Because we had
absolutely.
William Hyam came
Your
in
friend
as our
Tom.
market, our
Yes.
friend Tom Butler. So we, at this point, we still really
And
thought
of
that
course,
we could raise some
James,
decent money.
the much missed
James Sandlands.
James
Sandlands.
Sandlands.
Yeah, dear man,
Yeah.
whose very premature death was a real blow in those
Yeah.
early
Yeah.
stages, and so he's still part of Rock's Back Pages in my mind, and was just such a dear soul,
Yeah.
and a grown up, and he and Tony, in a sense, I think made it possible.
I think so. Without them,
for us, yeah,
In fact,
the discipline was there.
It was actually James who brought Tony in. I'd met Tony before.
right,
I'd been
right,
designing
yes.
websites for his
Yes,
various
that was
companies, but it was James who suggested that Tony's the guy who can really sort of like tie things together.
So let's salute Tony while we're on the
Yeah,
subject,
well,
because
well,
Tony's been the grown-up through all
In
of
the
this
room
for us, the
from-
financial director for many years.
And a man who saw
Yeah.
Otis Redding in 1964 or whenever it was. I mean, a big
and
music
played
fan.
Hammond organ in an R&B band
Indeed.
at Cambridge.
Huge Steely Dan fan.
Yeah.
I
Yes.
mean, loves his
We
music.
could all bond around Steely Dan,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and so thank you, Tony. There's no doubt that without you, the thing would have crumbled a long time ago.
Yeah.
We were able to keep this thing going even when it was very, very difficult.
Yeah.
We were just not getting very much subscription activity.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
Yeah,
That's
and
absolutely right.
signing writers and
Yeah.
the whole organisational thing. I think we've probably reached the point that we kind of dreamed of reaching.
It
all those
absolutely is
years
what
ago.
we hoped it would be, and we have to thank, of course, all the writers for coming.
Yeah.
But we started with just a small critical mass
Yeah.
of probably 25 to 30 writers, including some big names
Yeah.
like Charlie Murray, some American writers. I think Charlie Gillett came on board. Paul Williams quite early on.
Yeah.
So we had big names, which then brought in many other names,
Yeah.
and we now have over 700
Yeah.
writers on Rock's Back Pages, and such a wide spread of different types of writers on all
Well, that was
genres.
always the dream, wasn't it? It was that you would find those things that no one remembered. Everyone remembers Rolling Stone.
Yeah.
Everyone remembers the great bits of music
Yeah.
journalism, but who remembers Beat magazine?
well,
and they're often the fantastic.
I rave
source.
on this podcast frequently about Dawn James
Yeah.
and her writing for Rave. Well, that's another discovery,
Mm.
and she's gone from pop music journalism history, and it turns out she's one of the best in writing in 1965.
Yeah.
So there's all of that I have a real passion actually for the teen writing, for the pre-serious rock writing.
Yeah, well, they were
Through-
there.
Through
They were
discovering a mag
access.
that I read when I was 8, which is fabulous. And you get it now, and you look at it. First of all, it's brilliantly designed. I had a discussion via Paul Gorman with Neville Brody. Were you influenced by it? And he denied it. But it's a lie. I mean, if you look at the Fabulous magazine, 1964-65, and you look at the face, there's an absolute straight line in
Wow.
aesthetic
Yeah.
terms. You know.
Yeah.
So finding all this other writing, other than the stuff which has been historical historicised.
Yes.
There are certain fixed shibboleths about what rock was and
Yeah.
who wrote about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And actually, what we've found, there's all this other stuff. In the mid-'60s, if I'd been my age, or let's say in my 20s or 30s in the mid-'60s, I'd been reading Record Mirror because it wrote about black music in a way that no one else wrote about black music. Norman Joplin, one of our writers.
Yes, Norman Joplin, great.
So for me, it's been a voyage of discovery, of finding all of this fascinating stuff.
That's absolutely right. I mean, it's great you mentioned Norman because he probably was the first really quite decent writer in the pop press, someone who was a bit of a stylist.
Yes,
and we all owe a lot to him, I think. I mean, you see, for me, and I think we'd all three agree about this, is that music journalism, the great papers of the 70s, for example, were almost as important as the music itself.
Yeah.
It was such a symbiotic relationship.
Yeah.
The way the culture was covered and processed and interpreted, and
also
the sounds of the records, the experience of going to gigs, it was all woven into one thing. Now people don't see it like that anymore, but for me, that's still incredibly important.
Well, if you think about it, now there's so much music around and it's so fragmented.
Yeah.
But then, if you're a Tom Waits fan, you may get 3 decent articles about Tom in a year.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you would read them and reread them, and you'd be so excited by those things.
And also, the chances are, at that age in the 70s, you probably didn't have much money if you were in your teens or early 20s in the mid-70s. Records are expensive. I mean, we did a comparison recently of the equivalent price, and an album would be like £35 now.
Yeah.
I mean, they were expensive.
So 29.11 was it?
It's £35 now. And records are expensive. You had to be very careful how you spent your money on records.
Yeah.
And so the music press, you developed a thing of, this is a writer whose tastes I trust.
Yes.
Yeah?
So that,
and you'd follow the writer's
absolutely,
buying
as much as you would follow the bands in
as-
some
indeed.
cases.
And remember, all you had was the radio. You didn't have Spotify. You didn't have access to all this stuff. You had the radio, so you had John Peel and a couple of the other, in England, a couple of the other evening DJs. And you had a music press. And that changed. I remember in 72, I was a Melody Maker reader. And then I went out of London, packed off to boarding school for a tussle with the Metropolitan Police involving a lump of hashish.
Surely not.
Came back in 1973 and went to a further education college, and suddenly the NME was on all the tables. Everyone had started reading the NME instead of the Melody Maker.
Because of the writers.
Because of the writers.
Yeah.
And so that was a process in and of itself. So my job is fabulous. I've got the best job in the world. I get to kind of go through all this stuff and find new stuff. And every week, like talking about the Mick Middle's review of Joy Division in 79, and that sort of stuff, which is incredibly exciting. He is talking about a band he saw the week before, who are now effectively legendary.
Yes, with no idea they would ever become legendary
Absolutely.
or anything beyond the next week.
He's just simply responding to what he's seen.
And also, like, just to mention that obviously somewhere along the way, I don't remember the exact year, but we had the idea that perhaps we could also digitise audio interviews. Starting with a bunch of my cassettes. Matt Snow, we haven't mentioned Matt because he's a very important
he was
part
in the early days.
of the early days and one of the first writers to come on board.
Yeah.
So we sort of got running with my old battered C90 cassettes and Matt's, and then gradually
up to Sigue Sputnik.
Yes, and it's all come to glorious fruition. But so we did start in parallel with all the text articles on RBP. We began digitising a new audio interview every week, and that's been going on some years now. I think we've got over 600.
And again, the value of that is that you could get an hour-long interview, which is distilled down to 1,500 words when in print. But there's all this other stuff which is talked about. Yeah. And some of that stuff's more interesting than stuff that ends up in print, for a variety of different reasons.
Well, when you actually hear David Crosby talking in 1967, which is one of the earliest we've got, or Clyde McFatter talking to Charlie Gillett in I think...
His Sound
69
of
or
the
70
City interviews.
Exactly. Those interviews he did for that amazing book. Or maybe for his Atlantic book. I'm not sure. I can't remember which it was. But there's something about hearing, like Mick Jagger talking in 1973, which is just different from people talking about the Rolling Stones
Or
in a
even reading
rearview
the
mirror.
sa-
In a
or
rearview
even
mirror.
reading those same
Or
words
even-
written
yeah.
down.
Yeah.
There's a
There's a lot of amazing
Atmosphere.
conversations in
Yeah.
our audio library,
Yeah.
which I've certainly found. You obviously get a sense of the artist's personality that you couldn't get any other way.
Sometimes too much of a sense of the other.
Yeah, some of them are incredibly funny. I mean, those recent ones we added on the Pistols,
they were
Rotten
gr-
and Vicious, just hysterically
Fantastic,
funny.
fantastic.
And Sid the other day.
Yeah. And then we got like Cliff White's marvellous interview with a clearly stoned Marvin Gaye, and it's a lengthy interview, and Marvin Gaye is off with the fairies to all intents and purposes.
76,
Yeah,
isn't it? Yeah.
It's for me it's gold
Yeah.
dust. It's
Yeah,
absolute gold dust.
And many more of those to come.
Yeah, yeah.
So, well, that's Rock's Back Pages. Not much more really to be said about it. Here we are, all this time later. Grayer, more stooped, but still full of passion, really, for the subject.
Absolutely.
So,
thanks for ringing me up that day.
Yeah,
He said
God,
he slightly
if I'd
clenched teeth.
known, I'd known what was going to happen as a result of that phone call. I'd also just like to give a shout out, Martin, to your wonderful book that
Nice.
you published last year.
Yeah.
Called 5 Things I Saw and Heard This Week, which essentially you put together and designed beautifully yourself. But it is the most wonderful kind of diary come scrapbook of just almost random passing obsessions, passions, things that you've enjoyed and loved, with amazing pictures. Tell us just a bit about this. You got a wonderful foreword by the great Richard Williams, who gave me my first break in music journalism.
I didn't know that.
So tell us just a little bit about Dispatches from the Everyday World of Music, Volume 1.
Well, yes,
You need to refer to it.
If you put Volume 1 on it, it kind of implies that you don't have to do Volume 2, which of course never happened with Dylan's Chronicles.
No, I know,
So,
exactly. Yeah.
Maybe I'm just following in Bob's footsteps there. Well, really, the blog came about because I've always, I mostly worked in magazine design. I had full-time jobs, but I had a kind of freelance mentality. And I would often have these thoughts I wanted to, about music and I was interested also in not writing about music in the way that the music press writes about it, which is obsessed with the new, the now, the thing that's being PR'd, whatever,
Yeah.
and a kind of album release schedule and all of that.
Yes.
But I wanted to say something about music. And then I'd always been a huge fan of Grail Marcus, who I mentioned earlier, and he did a very nice column called, I think it was called Different Things in Different Magazines, but it ran.
Yes.
And it was.
Well, was your original Real Life Rock?
Real Life Rock, the
Top
Village
10 of Real
Voice,
Life
maybe.
Rock
And I would
10,
always try
yeah.
and buy the Village Voice whenever I could, because I found New York fascinating,
Yeah.
and the Village Voice was kind of like unlike
Central to the experience in
Yeah,
New York,
exactly. And they
yes.
would these great articles and great photography too.
Yeah,
black
absolutely.
and white reportage photography. And he would do things like he talked about being in a stationer's in Paris and Peggy Lee coming on, the tape in the shop. And I thought, yeah, that's an interesting kind of way to approach it. So that's what I did. I thought, 5 things, that sounds a bit doable, And, some of it was pictorial. I'd see an advert. Or when I started, I was working in Edgware Road. And, round the corner were the Philips studios where Dusty and Scott Walker recorded. And then it was Solid Bond. Paul Weller bought it. And I thought, it's kind of interesting. And you walk around that area of Marylebone and Paddington, and, there's a Joe Strummer subway. And there's a plaque saying John Lennon lived here in 1968. And so those were the things I thought, this is funny. These things passed by. Or little references on radio programmes to things that I thought were interesting. So I'd followed some of them up.
Yeah.
So it was really a collage of stuff,
Yeah.
but music, not reviewing films, not reviewing music, but just where things happen. So a funny song used over the end of the credits of a film, I'd kind of write about, and then it just grew into that kind of thing, less frequent now.
Yeah.
There's so much
Well,
around.
the blog, of course.
The blog still
lives
goes on.
on.
This is actually the first 2 years. I thought I'll do a book of 5 years of 5
Yeah.
things, because it was coming up to the 5th anniversary. Then I started doing it, and I realised, of course, I'd written so many words. I'd done it every week, and then there's also bits where I quoted from articles or transcribed bits of radio programmes that I liked. So I was just kind of trying to keep all these things. So yeah, I had to do. It's only 2 years. It's in the book.
It's
so
fabulous.
volume 2.
It's really fabulous.
Well, that's very kind of you.
Yeah.
I thought I'd like to do it properly. I'd been doing some jobs that I hadn't really enjoyed, freelance design jobs. I'd been freelance for a couple of years now. I was doing freelance design jobs, and I wanted to do something for myself. So I hired a friend to edit it, because I was always complaining about books being badly edited and factually incorrect, and commissioned an illustration for the cover. And so I wanted to do it as properly as I could, and I found that Amazon do this thing called Create Space, where you just you tell them what size and colour, bleed, all of those things, and you upload the book as a PDF file, and they print it on demand. So one copy, you order a copy of this book, they print one copy and ship it to you. And I was thinking, how does that even work? That's an amazing idea. And if you spot mistakes in your own book, which I have, that's version 6. You just upload a new PDF.
Oh, God, I've got version 1. Bloody hell.
Littered.
Littered with errors.
Buy it now, folks. It's much better.
So I absolutely do recommend version 27 of Martin's wonderful book. Before we go and hear a second snippet of Sigue, Sputnik, I do want to ask you why there is a framed photograph of Mario Testino's portrait of Princess Diana.
Well, when I heard I was coming,
sitting next to you there.
when you invited me kindly on, I thought, well, what I need to do is get a rider for this appearance. And so I sent over, I needed a 6-foot sofa and a love seat, a bottle of Chivas Regal and a packet of cough drops, 100 prunes and figs, and a framed photo of Princess Diana, which I'm holding here. It's lovely. And 24 long-stem dethorned red roses. So, and then I said, it's a quiz. Whose riders did they come from?
Well, I mean, do we want to put that quiz to our listeners?
Yeah, no, give us the answers.
Okay, 6-foot sofa and a love seat, that's Elton John. A bottle of Chivas Regal and a packet of cough drops is just an excerpt from Frank's alcohol list. Frank Sinatra, that is. 100 prunes and figs and a framed photo of Princess Diana was part of Britney Spears' rider. I mean, I think Britney is a genius,
actually.
He listened to the records, Piece of Me, one of the greatest songs ever written and performed.
We agree. Yeah, we like our Britney.
Did you watch the Max Martin documentary?
No, I've got it.
So
it's worth it.
The remaining one was 24 long-stem dethorned red roses, which is the Rev Al Green.
Is it?
Yes, and as Mark and I went to see Al Green a couple of years ago at the Royal Albert Hall, and he's touring again in the States, and it was sensational.
Yeah.
There was no diminishing of his power. No. And he orchestrates the band. I mean, he also hands out the red roses.
And he hands out the dethorned.
Very thoughtful. But the orchestration of the band, they turned on a sixpence. He was the tension, the release.
The usual slight criticism's a bit too much medleyisation of hits.
Absolutely.
But his voice is in great nick because he's in that church every Sunday doing it in Memphis. He's kept his voice in fantastic.
Sensational. And I would recommend. If Al Green comes to your town, buy tickets.
Yeah, don't be disappointed if you only get like 55 minutes because Al Green only does 55 minutes.
But it will be
a great 55 minutes.
Okay. Well, so another difficult segue back to Sigue from the Reverend Al
Green. Such a problem with that, Barney.
Does anything segue to Sigue Sputnik? But Mark, talk us out.
Well, I think this is just we like bitching here at Rock's Back Page, and having Tony James bitching about Billy Idol is, I think, a very good way to kind of ease our way out of this podcast.
No envy or bitterness there, really, on Tony's part.
None.
Well, look, thanks for joining us as ever. This has been the Rock's Back Pages podcast. It's goodbye from Mark.
Bye.
It's goodbye from our very special guest, Martin.
It's been brilliant having you, Martin.
And it's goodbye from me. Fun. So see you next week. Thanks again. Bye.
So don't ask me about Billy Idol. Well, that crossed my mind, but then I thought probably. I mean, I've got lots of awful quotes about Billy Idol. Do you ever see him anymore, Billy Idol? Because he's gone almost the other way. Never so much beautiful body contained so little. Good. Would you agree he's gone the other way? I mean, he's still treading. He's someone who's still treading. When I read that interview of you, was saying off about all the getting pissed and lying in the gutter and stuff. He seems to be someone who's maybe pursuing that path a bit.
He always wanted to live that dream and become that when he ain't really. I think he writes great tunes. Right. but the fantasy he lives out is nonsense. That he when I first met him, he wanted to be the rebellious, dirty, drug-taking rocker. You can't use this because it's written off film. But he always wanted to be that, and he's finally moved to America, and he's sort of living out that fantasy.
Successfully as well. Probably.
Very, very successfully. Yeah. But I'd rather be successful and be healthy to enjoy it.
Sigue Sputnik, affordable firepower.
That was Julian Henry hearing from Tony James of Sigue Sputnik in 1985, concluding this week's Rock's Backpages podcast. Many thanks to special guest Martin Colyer, whose blog can be found at 5thingsseenandheard.com. The book, 5 Things I Saw and Heard This Week, is available on Amazon. The hosts were Barney, Hoskyns and Mark Pringle, and the producer was Jasper Murison-Bowie. As ever, you can find thousands of articles, as well as hundreds of full-length audio interviews at rocksbackpages.com.
I love technology.